long time since my last layout update. Maybe 7 months or so, which, again, usually I liked to make a habit of doing layout updates every month, give or take. But recently I haven't been doing a whole lot with the layout. I mean, aside from the obvious so far. I've just been very busy, but I still really love to do hobby stuff. And the few chances that I've gotten to work on the layout, I have seriously tried to make as much of a difference as I could. Of course, a lot of the things I have set up here are temporary for now. I'll put some stuff in permanently eventually. This is all just to get an idea going for what I want with this layout, and the specific cosmetics are going to come later. I believe that I remember where I left off the last update and what I've done since then, so I suppose I'll get started. One of the first things I did was experiment with using wooden construction for catenary poles, and this short stretch I made on the inner loop works fine. I haven't had any issue with it. Of course, I haven't used it much just because it's a short stretch, but it's held up okay. It's taut enough. The pantograph against it isn't much of a problem. It actually makes exceptional contact. These poles are so much cheaper than the metal poles, just like in real life. They're less sturdy. If you knock into them, the cross arms will probably break off. So you got to be more careful with them. With these, you can certainly mess around with them a lot more and they won't fall apart, but with these poles, you definitely want to be more careful, which is why I'm a little hesitant to use these. I'll see how everything else goes. I might just use brass poles on the inside as well, but I've got more on that in a second. But aesthetically, I really like these poles. They're certainly closer to an interurban in terms of aesthetic. And I've always wanted an interurban themed layout. I just, obviously I won't have the space for a big layout like this and a smaller layout. It really wouldn't work unless I made the smaller layout collapsible and put it behind the layout, which, believe me, I've thought about, but might just be a little too much layout for me. This entire stretch at the back is going to see some upgrades in terms of overhead. I know I put in new overhead here a few months ago, but I've been wanting to add this feature to the layout for a while. And that would be double track gantries. These have been put together a little differently than the majority of my single track poles. Of course, that will support the overhead for both of these tracks, giving the inner loop some solid electrification as well. Plus, I mean, really the main reason I'm doing this is aesthetics. I don't have any double track gantries on the layout yet. I mean, I have a few that could serve as double track gantries, but they don't currently. Like, for example, up here, I could certainly use this to hang the wire, and that's the plan. But I don't have that many purpose-built ones, and these will fill the job. I'm still gonna make a couple more of them, but that's the plan for back here. Again, like I said, aesthetically, it'll be nice to look down this stretch and have sort of effectively a visual tunnel of overhead equipment, which I think will look very cool. And I'll be able to have electric freight trains running both ways on both loops, which is kind of my end goal and something I'd really, really love to see. Another project I've been working on is this battery-operated Lionel 080 switcher. Mostly just as a test bed to see, what I could do with this, and it's just kind of neat. This locomotive was line chief, but the line chief board gave out, and it wouldn't receive a signal. And I could have bought a new board, which would have been too expensive, honestly, and I could have bought a bridge rectifier, but if I'm honest, I didn't really want to wait for that to arrive, so instead, I just switched this whole locomotive to a self-contained DC system with a battery. There's a little charging port here. This can run for a couple hours without needing to be recharged. Recharging only takes about 15 minutes. I have my controls back here. It's not radio controlled. I may do radio control at some point. It can't be that hard. You just got to order the right system. But For now, I can just use the polarity switch and the potentiometer wired into this thing to make it run. And of course, it will always run smoothly because it doesn't require any pickup from the rails. Now, of course, I think for indoor railroads, I don't think battery locomotives have that much potential because, you know, regular electric is great because you never have to recharge it or anything, and you don't have to fit a battery into the locomotive. This I will cover up at some point, but for now it's just kind of exposed. But I think for outdoor applications and dead rail, you know, this is great. It's certainly low effort in comparison to live steam, and you get a similar kind of feel. You still have to do something to the locomotive to get it to run, which is recharge it. But I also feel like this would be useful in a yard because you wouldn't have to worry about cutting out on switches if you had a radio-controlled locomotive, which this part of the point of this locomotive was to do that, but, you know, my layout isn't exactly conducive to switching. But I might take this to a layout that is at some point and try that out. Granted, you have to be in reach of the controls, but with radio control, that wouldn't be an issue. Here's another big feature on the layout that I've added recently. This is, of course, a model of a power plant meant to represent nuclear. I know that coal plants also have big cooling towers, but this has a what is meant to be a reactor building. So yeah, this is meant to represent a nuclear plant. I'll probably model a few other types of power on the layout as well. Trackside, just because I have a massive interest in energy and power and electricity. And, you know, I mean, the train's got to get power from somewhere, right? And it goes with my little nuclear material handling car that I made down there. And by the way, the cooling tower model there is just a wastebasket. Just a wastebasket for the room that I noticed had the same sort of profile as the cooling tower if you flipped it upside down. And, well, I did just that, and I painted it gray, and it looks fine. So if you ever want to model a power plant, remember, you know, cheap plastic wastebaskets make perfect cooling towers. Of course, aside from the power plant, the most notable feature on the layout now is this roadway. This is all 1/43rd slot car stuff. It's Carrera track, and the cars I have use Carrera mechanics in order to operate. Not all of these vehicles are slot ready. The only car so far that I've gotten to work on slots is this Bel Air. I'll go into detail on that in a minute, but for now I've just got a whole bunch of vehicles posed on the bridge. It would be very cool to get a lot of these working, but the vehicle has to have the right dimensions and enough space inside to support all of the electronics and mechanics and stuff needed to keep the car going. And I would love to make a moving truck or bus, but the longer wheelbases would prove challenging on the very tight corners that slot car track has. Let me talk about the layout and sort of infrastructure that I've put together for the moving roadway so far. I've been messing around with the idea of a bridge here for the longest time. I think in my ideas for this layout, I always wanted a bridge of some kind here, whether it just be a static model or something moving via whatever means. I've considered a lot of different kinds of systems for a moving roadway. I've thought about a magnetic chain system like MagnaRail. I've thought about a rope moved by pulleys with cars tied off to it. I've thought about a lot of things, but this was the only thing that really kind of worked because it was a ready-made system, and if I'm honest, I'm not too good with working with stuff that isn't ready-made to some degree. At least in terms of finicky, mechanical, and more engineering stuff. So I went with Carrera 1/43rd slot car track, and from that I was able to get all the measurements and stuff I needed for this bridge. The base here, or the deck of the bridge, is all plywood stuff. It's a few pieces actually, because I just used scrap pieces because I didn't want to, buy more. It's all tied together under here with some plates. Of course, this whole thing isn't entirely ready. I need to do a little bit more cable management down here. But this is just a plywood base with these craft wood barriers here. There's a straight piece and then there's a triangular piece that come together to make a very convincing highway barrier shape. And with that all painted light gray, it looks like concrete and it looks exactly how I want it. One of the other draws of this bridge is the lighting. I have, I think about 12, yeah, I'd say 12 Lionel highway lights. I like how these look. They have a very modern feel, but they're still retro. Lionel described them as modern in the 70s, so now they're retro. But I always like this design. I like that they use incandescent lights. I like the glow they provide, and I think that they add another dimension to the layout while you're running at night. I've got them on their own transformer that is variable, so I can change the brightness of the lights as I please, which is very important for this many lights. Let me turn off this spotlight for a second. Normally, of course, the bridge casts a shadow onto the running track below, which is, a little unfortunate because part of the reason of having a train layout is looking at the trains running. If you get down a little more, you can get a perfectly fine view, but I'll probably want to put some lights underneath this bridge. I don't know how I would do it though. I'd probably still go with incandescent, just maybe 3 or so spotlights under the bridge to illuminate it nicely and keep the trains in view. I could even put, let me see. I could put this yard light under there, or a couple of those. But anyways, going through the track layout a little bit more, it's the dog bone, just like the trains actually. And it's 2 loops just like the trains. Well, you can't help that it's 2 loops because it's slot car track. But I wanted a 4-lane bridge here, just like how I wanted several lines of track here. Sort of branches off from each other here. It just loops back around over here. Conveniently, heads down this street that was already there that I'm going to have to adjust this curve a little bit. And of course, eventually I'm going to paint over or remove these racetrack line decals, which I think look cool, but they just don't really fit the layout. There's enough room behind here to have a nice straight stretch running all the way back without having to change too much. Then over here, the track comes back around here. It's floating over here, but I'll fix that eventually. Heads around back, goes back over the bridge again. I had to move pretty much all the buildings here. It's unfortunate that there's less buildings here. I will hopefully fix that and or put, the sort of cream of the crop nicer buildings here. Get them all illuminated and then get the street scenes in for good when I feel like doing that. Which will probably be once I get this whole slot car track down pat and can start work on the finer scenery. Now I suppose I'll get into the vehicles, or right now vehicle, but I'll show you one that I'm working on. Of course, this is a Chevrolet Bel Air. The cars that came in this set were actually just NASCAR stock cars, but those didn't really fit the vibe of the layout, of course, so I thought I would change it to something, more civilian and more retro with this Bel Air. I looked at all the cars I had and considered a lot of factors, like if I would care about cutting it up a little bit to make it work, and if, the car would actually accept the electronics, which, to be fair, the electronics in the entire frame is really compact for what it is. It's just a simple DC motor, some resistors, and the pickups at the front. And if you're able to accommodate those, you're golden. Which most cars can, but it's mostly a question about wheelbase. As you can see here, the wheelbase doesn't quite line up, but because this car has a very stylized rear fender here, I didn't really think it looked that weird. I thought it added to sort of the stylization of it. And once it's going around, you won't really notice. The other vehicle I'm trying, I am attempting to lengthen the frame, which I'll get to in a moment. But of course, this car, this shell was actually quote-unquote weathered by me previously. I just slathered a bunch of brown acrylic paint on it, and it really didn't look so good, so I removed all of that and got it to a nice look. It still has a little bit of a patina on it, which I kind of like. It seems quite realistic that way. But my favorite feature of this car, without a doubt, is the lighting. I'll get this thing running in just a moment. I'm running the slot car system off of this HO DC train controller. One, because I have it on hand, and two, because, well, it's a little easier than using the little hand trigger things that they give you. Gives you finer control, and it lets you run it on standby, so you don't have to be holding down a button. The thing is, these are a bit tricky to get going slower on curves because they get hung up. That's just kind of the nature of the system. So the cars are a little speedier than desired, but this is still, I think, a perfectly reasonable speed. In person, it's fine. On video, it's a little blurred. But with time, I'm sure the system will break in and I'll be able to run these a little slower. But as you're able to notice, I've got functional headlights and functional brake lights. She's stuck. Functional brake lights. Yep. The headlights are incandescent bulbs, as you can probably tell. Just plain old put where the headlights used to be, and then the taillights are LEDs in the body of the car. I did not like the way that LED headlights looked on this. I tried them. They were too bright. They were too blue. I could have chosen, warmer LEDs, but you really cannot beat incandescent for looks, I think, which explains why most of my train passenger cars and my city lights are all incandescent, beyond just convenience of having them. But seeing the car go around, especially in the dark, it's really something. I forgot to show you the lights on the bridge. There they are. I'll turn off the spotlight here and get a better idea. I'll put in some night running scenes and pictures later in the vid, but this is sort of what we're dealing with here. I think it just looks absolutely wonderful. I'll get the car running. But this is something I wanted to add to the layout for a while. I always thought that moving auto systems was a cool idea. And I guess I'll show you the other vehicle I've been working on. Here I have a Chevy pickup, which I'm thinking about converting to a slot car. I mean, I already cut the frame in half, so yeah, I'm going to convert this to slot car. I only needed to cut the frame just a little bit for everything to line up. There's not much extension I need to do, so I'm not worried about the wheelbase having issues around curves. I also had to desolder the resistors from the pickups here, just so that it would actually come apart. And for now, I haven't done much with this because I already have one operational car. One of the reasons why I chose this truck was, well, for more vehicle diversity, because now we can have a pickup. And the lights would be absolutely perfect to swap out for those tiny incandescent bulbs that I managed to find and put in my Bel Air. I have had to make some modifications to the die-cast body to fit the motor. I may have to make more, but for now, I'm happy with how this looks, and I can't wait to get this running. So I'll have two cars going instead of just one. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.